She tried to speak, but her words came out garbled. Panic set as her tongue began to grow, stretching and twisting beyond her control. Nneka was well known in her village, not just for her beauty or charm, but for her sharp tongue and lack of constraint. Her words cut like a knife, and she never missed an opportunity to speak her mind, often in the cruelest way possible. Nneka took pride in her outspokenness, which she saw as honesty, and scoffed at those who couldn't handle her truth. Villagers would often tell tales of her cutting remarks, and her reputation only seemed to grow stronger with each insult. Her friends, family, and even strangers had all tasted her venom at one point or another, and many believed she took pleasure in their discomfort. Despite her harmful words, few dared to confront Nneka directly, fearing they would become her next targets. The village elders warned her that a tongue as sharp as hers could bring trouble, but she laughed off their concerns. To her, anyone who was offended by her words was simply too sensitive. Nneka saw herself as strong and honest, in contrast to others who in her mind were weak. But this confidence led her to be careless, believing she could get away with anything she said. She didn't realize that words had a way of lingering long after they were spoken, and the wounds they left could take years to heal. Every market day, Nneka strutted confidently through the bustling stores, her mouth ready to unleash a torrent of insults at anyone who crossed her path. The marketplace was a lively place filled with vendors selling everything from fresh fish to vibrant fabrics, and Nneka found endless amusement in mocking those around her. She would point out the smallest flaw, whether it was a wrinkle on a merchant's face or the faded color of their wares, and loudly broadcast her observations for all to hear. The more people winced or turned away, the more satisfaction she derived from her words. One day, she saw a woman struggling with her basket of goods. Instead of offering help, Nneka laughed, calling her clumsy and lazy for not being able to handle her load. The woman, red-faced, hurried away, but not before the other villagers turned to look, silently judging Nneka's cruelty. Despite the whispers and glances, Nneka seemed oblivious to the effects her words had on others. She wore her harshness as a badge of honor, and twisted sense of pride that isolated her from the warmth and connection others shared in the village. On a particular bright market day, Nneka's mood was unusually sore, and she found herself more irritable than usual. Her sharp tongue was sharper, her words biting harder as she made her way through the marketplace. Her morning had started poorly, with a series of small inconveniences that she decided to take out on anyone unfortunate enough to cross her path. It was her belief that people needed to hear the truth, no matter how unkind it might be. This morning, the truth she delivered was especially venomous. She encountered an elderly woman with shaking hands, attempting to arrange her produce, and Nneka couldn't resist.
Why even bother coming to the market if your old hands can't keep steady?
She sneered, watching as the old woman's face flushed with embarrassment. The onlookers shook their heads, muttering among themselves, but none dared to say anything aloud. Nneka's pleasure grew as she relished the elderly woman's discomfort, thinking herself clever and sharp. Little did she know that her words were building a wall between her and the community, a wall that would soon trap her in her own misery. Young children were not immune to Nneka's insults, and she took particular pleasure in scolding them as they ran around the market with carefree spirits. One day, a little boy ran past her, bumping into her by accident as he chased after his friends. Nneka spun around and glared at the child, who immediately froze under her gaze.
Clumsy fool!
She barked, her voice loud enough to silence the chatter around her.
Do you not know how to watch where you're going? Maybe if your mother taught you manners, you wouldn't be running around like a wild animal.
The boy's eyes welled up with tears as he looked down at his feet, ashamed and fearful. His mother rushed over, apologizing profusely, but Nneka waved her off with a dismissive hand, her face twisted in disdain.
Teach your child some discipline.
She snapped before walking away. Villagers nearby watched in silence, their pity for the boy mingled with their growing resentment towards Nneka. It was moments like this that hardened the hearts of those around her, making them wish for one day when she might finally taste her own medicine. In the marketplace, the traders bore the brunt of Nneka's cruel humor. She would mock their goods and criticize their hard work, all this believing she was simply pointing out the truth. One day, she passed a fisherman displaying his day's catch and wrinkled her nose in disgust.
Are those supposed to be fish?
She scoffed loudly, making sure others could hear her ridicule.
No one with sense would buy such sad looking creatures. You should be ashamed to call yourself a fisherman.
The fisherman clenched his jaw, fighting back the urge to respond. As he could not afford to lose customers by getting into an argument, he lowered his gaze, swallowing his pride, while Nneka moved on, satisfied she had put him in his place. The market's usual bustling sound seemed quieter as people turned their backs on Nneka, hoping to avoid her wrath. But her cruelty left a lingering bitterness, a sense that the harmony of the marketplace was tainted each time she passed through. Nneka had no sympathy for mothers trying to manage their children at the market. She saw their struggles as weakness and took every chance to make her disdain known. On one occasion, she watched as a young woman struggled to keep her toddler from running into the busy thoroughfare. Instead of offering help, Nneka called out with a sneer.
If you can't control your child, you shouldn't have any. You are a disgrace to womanhood.
The young woman, already tired and frazzled, flushed with embarrassment, pulling her child close and avoiding Nneka's gaze. Other mothers nearby glared at Nneka but kept silent, knowing any retort would only fuel her further. As Nneka continued through the market, she left behind her a trail of hot mothers and crying children, sowing seed of resentment that would one day come back to haunt her. Nneka's ability to find flaws in others was relentless, and she rarely hesitated to share her observations with an unkind laugh. One day, she spotted a merchant whose crooked teeth were visible every time he smiled. She made a show, pointing at him and loudly exclaiming,
Do you think anyone wants to see that ugly smile of yours? At least cover your mouth if you have nothing worthwhile to show.
The merchant's face turned red, his pride wounded as laughter erupted from those around him. Yet, even those who laughed did so out of nervousness, afraid that they might be the next target. They didn't dare stand up for the merchant, fearing her wrath would turn on them instead. Nneka felt powerful, thinking herself untouchable, while the marketplace became increasingly tense whenever she was around. Nneka's disdain even extended to the cherished traditions of the village. One day, as she walked through the market, she came across a group of dancers performing a traditional dance. Instead of appreciating their art, she sneered, making exaggerated gestures as if mocking their movements.
Why waste time on these foolish dances?
She called out, her voice dripping with sarcasm.
Only those with nothing better to do could find this nonsense enjoyable.
The dancers faltered, their rhyme broken by her ridicule, while the spectators looked on in disappointment. Nneka's words stung, reducing a cultural celebrations to a source of shame. They just whispered among themselves, saddened by her lack of respect, but too wary of her tongue to confront her. The community spirit dimmed with every insult she threw, leaving a shadow over the once lively marketplace. Nneka's lack of respect didn't stop with her peers. Even the elders of the village were not spared from her scorn. One afternoon, she encountered an elderly man with a hunched back, slowly making his way through the marketplace. Instead of offering assistance, she laughed and shouted,
Look at you, barely able to walk. Perhaps you should just stay home where you belong instead of dragging yourself around like that.
The old man's face flushed, but he kept his gaze lowered, unwilling to engage with Nneka's hurtful words. The other villagers looked in dismay, silently grieving the way she treated those who should have commanded the utmost respect. Nneka's relentless mockery of the elderly cast a pall over the marketplace, with each insult deepening the community's resentment. Unknown to her, these seeds of discord were slowly isolating her from the village she took for granted. One day, Nneka passed by the village tailor store, where colorful fabrics and intricate designs were proudly displayed. The tailor had spent years perfecting his craft, but this was of no concern to Nneka, who saw only an opportunity to belittle someone. She picked up a garment, inspecting it with a mocking look, and loudly declared,
This teaching is laughable. No one would ever wear this unless they had no taste.
The tailor's smile faded as his hard work was turned down by Nneka's words. He bit his lips, struggling to keep his composure while Nneka smirked, pleased with herself. She moved on, leaving the tailor humiliated and the onlookers deeply unsettled. Despite their sympathy for the tailor, no one dared to challenge Nneka, as her venomous tongue was feared by all. The village healer was highly respected for her knowledge of herbs and remedies, but even she was not immune to Nneka's scorn. When Nneka caught sight of her offering advice to a young woman, she smirked and said,
Herbs and roots? Who needs those? Only fools would rely on your so called wisdom.
The healer looked up, her calm demeanor momentarily disrupted by Nneka's words. The young mother shifted uncomfortably, unsure of whom to believe, while Nneka continued to taunt the healer's practices. Although the healer chose not to respond, the villagers looked on in disappointment, saddened by Nneka's lack of respect for their traditions and wisdom. The village blacksmith was known for his strength and skills, but Nneka took it upon herself to undermine his reputation. One day, as he proudly displayed a new set of tools, Nneka approached and sneered.
This is the best you can do? I've seen children make better works with sticks and stones.
The blacksmith's face grew dark, but he held his tongue, unwilling to curse a sin. The crowd around them muttered disapprovingly, and even the children looked up at Nneka with disappointment. But she, blind to the harm she cursed, continued to walk around the marketplace with a smug look, oblivious to the walls she was building between herself and the community. On one fateful market day, Nneka encountered a woman whose hair was tightly wrapped in a simple cloth. Instead of minding her own business, Nneka pointed and laughed, saying,
Is this supposed to be a hairstyle? It looks like you just rolled out of bed.
The woman's face flushed with embarrassment, her hands reaching up to adjust the clothes she had worn out of necessity. The bystanders glared at Nneka, who continued to laugh, oblivious of their disapproval. Her mockery seemed endless, and the villagers silently prayed for a day when she would be humbled. On this particular market day, Nneka noticed a strange woman standing by the fruit stall, dressed in old clothes and carrying a mysterious air around her. Without hesitation, Nneka approached her with a mocking smile.
Who lets you in here looking like that? She sneered. You look like you crawled out from under a rock.
The strange woman looked at Nneka calmly, unbothered by the harsh words. She simply smiled. an airy, knowing smile, and said, "Beware of what you speak, for words have power." Nneka rolled her eyes, dismissing the warning as nonsense. Little did she know that this encounter would mark the beginning of a dramatic change in her life. As Nneka walked away from the strange woman, she suddenly felt a strange sensation on her tongue, as if it were swelling. She tried to speak, but her words came out garbled. Panic set as her tongue began to grow, stretching and twisting beyond her control. In horror, she realized that the old woman's warning was not idle talk. This was a curse, a punishment for her loose tongue. The strange woman watched from a distance, her smile unbroken as Nneka's cry grew louder. "Let this be a lesson," the woman said, her voice carrying across the marketplace. "Words are not to be thrown around carelessly. May your own words be your downfall." Nneka tried to hide her elongated tongue, but her attempts only grew more attention. The villagers gasped and whispered, watching in shock as the once proud and cruel Nneka struggled with her own words. Her tongue, now twisted and swollen, made it impossible for her to speak properly. She looked at the faces of those she had insulted, seeing a mix of pity and satisfaction in their eyes. The market that had once been her stage was now her place of shame. She could no longer mock or insult. Her own mouth had become her prison. Desperate, she tried to plead with those around her, but her words came out as incomprehensible sounds. For the first time, Nneka tasted the bitterness of humiliation, and it was a harsh reminder of her own cruelty. Humbled and desperate, Nneka went to the village elders, hoping they could reverse the curse that had been placed on her. She tried to explain her fleet, but her swollen tongue had made her speech nearly unintelligible. The elders listened patiently, their expression thoughtful, but they didn't seem sympathetic. They had warned her many times about the powers of words, but she had ignored them. After much deliberation, the head leader finally spoke. "The tongue is a powerful weapon, Nneka, and yours have harmed many. This curse is not ours to lift. You must seek forgiveness from those you have wronged and show that you've truly changed." Nneka's heart sank, and she knew that redemption would not come easily. Nneka thought she had learnt her lesson after encountering the strange woman, but the villagers had a different perspective. Word of her elongated tongue spread like wildfire, and instead of offering support, they began to mock her relentlessly. Each time she walked through the marketplace, whispers and jiggles followed her. "Look at Nneka and her snake tongue," one woman would jeer, while another would add, "Maybe now she would think twice before insulting others." The laughter cut deep, and Nneka felt her heart sink lower with each passing day. What had once been a place of community turned into a stage for her humiliation. Even the children joined in pointing and taunting whenever she passed by. She tried to ignore them, but their words stung like arrows, each taunting a reminder of her past cruelty. She had become the village spectacle, and the weight of her ridicule pressed heavily on her shoulders. As the days turned into weeks, Nneka retreated into isolation. She no longer visited the market or mingled with neighbors. Instead, she spent her days hidden in her home, avoiding the scornful eyes of the villagers. The once vibrant woman who had spoken her mind freely now felt trapped by her own tongue and the shame it brought to her. In her solitude, Nneka reflected on her behavior and the pain she had inflicted on others. Every unkind word she had spoken echoed in her mind, a relentless reminder of her past. She longed to turn back time, to erase the harsh comments that had brought her into this low point. But the villagers, having tasted her cruelty, were unforgiving, and she was left to grapple with her own despair. Nneka ventured out for the first time in weeks, but her experience was unbearable. As she stepped into the village square, Silence fell over the crowd. All eyes were on her, and the whispers resumed. Look at her, the girl with the tongue of a lizard. They laughed and pointed, their mockery piercing her heart. Nneka's cheeks burned with shame. She tried to hold her head high, but her confidence shattered under the weight of their scorn. The laughter ranged her ear like a cruel melody, and she felt as if the ground might swallow her whole. It was clear her punishment had become a public spectacle, and she was the unwilling star of the show she never wanted to be part of. Every time she closed her eyes, she could see the face of those she had insulted, their expressions hot and confused. It was a heavy burden to her, knowing that her words had caused pain. The villagers' laughter echoed in her mind, serving as a constant reminder of her shame. Nneka's heart ached for redemption, but the path seemed insurmountable, obscured by the forge of her own regrets. Days turned into weeks, and Nneka's isolation deepened. The villagers had found a new source of amusement, turning their scorn towards her whenever she ventured too close. Children would imitate her speech, twisting their tongue and laughing at her expense. Nneka could feel their disdain, and it crushed her spirit further. With each day that passed, her heart hardened. She began to resent the villagers for their cruelty, wondering if they had ever known kindness. But deep down, she recognized that her past actions had set the stage for her current misery. The irony of her situation was not lost on her. She had once been the one mocking others, and now she was at the receiving side. Nneka realized she had become a victim of her own making. One evening, as Nneka sat alone in a dimly lit home, she caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror. Her reflection was distorted, not for her appearance, but the weight of her misery. The woman who had once been vibrant and full of life now looked weary and broken. It was then that she made her decision. She would no longer be defined by her past. The next day, Nneka ventured into the marketplace again, determined to reclaim her dignity. As she walked through the square, she felt the familiar stares and heard the whispers begin again. But this time, instead of sinking into despair, she stood tall. I am more than my tongue, she declared, her voice steady, echoing through the crowd. Nneka's bold declaration caught the villagers off guard. For a moment, silence cleared the air, and then the mocking laughter faltered. Nneka faced them, her heart racing, but her resolve unwavering. I have learned the consequences of my words, and I refuse to be ashamed any longer, she proclaimed. The villagers exchanged glances, their expression shifting from amusement to uncertainty. Though the laughter had faded, the scars of her past still lingered in the air. Nneka realized that the journey to rebuild her reputation would be long and arduous, but at that moment, she found strength in her vulnerability. She began to speak around her experiences, sharing her journey of shame and regret, hoping to inspire others to reflect on their actions as well. Over time, Nneka's boldness began to change the atmosphere of the marketplace. People who once laughed at her started to listen. The children who mocked her learned to see the humility in her struggle. With each story she shared, Nneka chipped away at the wall of struggle, replacing it with understanding and empathy. As she continued to speak, the villagers slowly began to respect her. They recognized the courage it took to confront her past and to admit her wrongs. While not everyone accepted her transformation, many felt a shift in their hearts. Nneka was no longer the girl with the long tongue. She had become a symbol of resilience. One evening, as Nneka wandered near the edge of the village, she saw a figure standing under the large baobab tree. Her heart skipped a beat as she recognized the woman, her mysterious visitor from that fateful day in the marketplace. The woman's eyes gleamed in the midlight, her presence powerful and otherworldly. Nneka approached cautiously, bowing her head in respect, feeling both fear and gratitude for the return of the figure who had taught her the harsh lesson she had carried so long. The strange woman smiled, her gaze softened as she took Nneka's humble demeanor. I have watched you, Nneka, she said, her voice a blend of wind and whispers. I have seen your change. You have witnessed your shame, and I see the remorse within your heart. Nneka fell to her knees, tears welling in her eyes. She begged for forgiveness, expressing her regret and recounting the journey of pain and growth she had endured. The woman nodded slowly. You have learned the importance of kindness, humility, and respect. You now understand the power of words, both to harm and to heal. With a wave of her hands, a soft light began to envelop Nneka. Her elongated tongue, the very symbol of her punishment, began to shrink, returning to its normal size. As the light faded, Nneka touched her lips in disbelief, feeling her normal tongue again for the first time since her curse. The strange woman placed a hand on Nneka's shoulder, offering a final word of wisdom. Let this be a reminder to speak with care and treat others with respect. Use your words to bring healing and not harm. And with that, she disappeared into the night. The end. Thank you guys for watching. Please like this video and don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more interesting stories like this.